Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. This is Newsfeed, the AM edition. I'm Ayanda Nyathi. It's great to have you with us. So we're well into, I guess, the third week of the national lockdown. And as we do at the beginning of each day, we help you understand where we are in this, I guess, ongoing story, really, as we help you track the major developments that you need to know about. And for that purpose, today we're joined by our assignments editor, Mpho Raphata, who's going to help us understand how Newzroom Afrika is going to be treating the story today, and of course, help us make sense of the headlines in the newspapers. Mpho, it's always great having you with us. Welcome back once again. How are we treating the story today?
Good morning, Ayanda. We're treating the story in different ways this morning. So, first of all, we go to Limpopo, where Hitekane is following the premier of the province and the health MEC and other health workers on a drive, a launch rather, of the screening and testing. We've seen screening and testing being rolled out across the country. Gauteng has done it, KZN has done it, the Eastern Cape has done it. So it looks as if the entire government is really rallying towards the screening and testing. I've said this before, it's the next phase of dealing with COVID-19. The more screening, the more testing, the more people we can find, and the sooner we can treat people. And like what we have seen last week when the president was talking to us, we have a different trajectory to other countries.
Yeah.
So it seems to be helping. So this is what Hitekane will be following in Limpopo this morning. And then when we come back here, we are looking at waste pickers. These are the people you and I come across in the early hours of the morning when we're driving to work, who are collecting stuff, and what we're seeing is now they're also getting relief from government. Last week, Barbara Creasy, who's the Minister for Environmental Affairs, was speaking to big corporates and who had undertaken that they were going to give help to these people, as well as government, who also made an undertaking to give people money. And what we're actually doing with Mbali today is tracking someone who either has the funding and what help this funding has had for them,
right,
and someone who hasn't. You know, where are the bottlenecks there? What are the things that this person is finding themselves having to do without that little income that, you know, the money that waste picking was giving to them? So that's where Mbali is at today. And if we look at Mpumalanga, it's one of the biggest stories in the past week about the torching of schools.
Yeah.
South Africans seem to be vandalizing and torching schools. And if the lockdown ends in 2 weeks' time, Ayanda, that means children have got to go back to school.
Absolutely.
You know, so we are torching schools at an alarming rate.
Yeah, the figure's sitting at like, what, 183 from the last statement that we got from the Department of Education?
They're saying here the Star is reporting that more than 180 schools have been damaged across the country over the last 5 weeks.
That is just unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's what Moeli is following. We were shocked last week when the Education Department in Gauteng was talking about the number of schools that were damaged. Mpumalanga seems to also have a very high level of schools that have been torched and damaged. So we're tracking that. We're asking communities why.
Right.
You know, to what end, to what benefit?
Right, and that's, I think, you know, becomes the next step in our diagnosis of the situation. Where are the communities when this happens? I mean, the schools don't exist in silos, right, in far distant islands.
No.
They're usually very, like, incubated by people who constantly walking around and are able to look at it.
It's our responsibility as the community to protect schools.
Yeah.
And if we're allowing people to vandalize these schools, where are our children going to go back to schools to?
Yeah.
You know, and another story, that we're following is in the Northwest. Part of what the lockdown has wanted to do was to keep as many people, obviously, away from work as possible, right? And from what we understand, Impala Platinum in the Northwest has seemingly sent messages to its employees to come back to work. Now, we're talking about 40,000 people, right?
Right.
Are these people going back to work? So what we're doing is we're sending Zintle out there to go and track for us. Are these 40,000 people really going back to work? And if they are going back to work, what impact does this have on our fight against the coronavirus, especially in the Northwest, where they've got issues about health care and all of that. So can we afford it? That's what Zintle is tracking. Another issue we want to actually see is, with less people having been at work and all of that, the power generation in the country, you haven't seen load shedding, right?
Yeah.
So if mines are saying people must go back to work, what impact will that have on the grid? You know, so that's where Zintle is at this morning. We will monitor that story closely. Who has summoned people to work? Why have people been summoned to work?
On what basis, yeah. You know, what's the authority under which
they're saying that people are saying mining is an essential service just as much as getting food and all of that. So over and above sending Zintle there, we also want to have a conversation with the Mineral Resources Department. Where are you coming from? If you're aware of these things happening, what are you doing about them? Why is it happening? How is it going to happen? Because if one mine can open its doors, then other mines can, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if this is an exceptional circumstance, we need to know what the exceptions are in order to be able to gauge where we can actually draw the line and make sure that there isn't any kind of fluid lockdown happening, because that defeats the purpose. Completely.
Most definitely, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's segue into the newspapers. Like kick us off for the business day. Ironically, you speak about energy generation. I'll get to the front page in just a moment. But on page 6, there's, I don't know, I guess there was, you know, meant to be some kind of wit taking place in this cartoon. But it's essentially a cartoon of the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, after he had announced that the extension of the lockdown would be implemented. So the speech bubble they have there is that we've decided to extend the nationwide lockdown by a further 2 weeks beyond the initial 21 days. That's what we all know had happened. But what we know to be the strap, that's kind of the text at the bottom of the screen, reads, breaking news, South Africans score an extra 2 weeks of uninterrupted electricity supply. So that's kind of, I guess, the spin-off of having the lockdown implemented, given, of course, that it's a complete and strict lockdown. The fact that, you know, we kind of get to enjoy, for better or for worse, uninterrupted supply of electricity because of a reduction of the grid. But as you mentioned, now that Impala's planning to open its doors, if they do go ahead with this, one does wonder what the effects will be on the grid. But the front page, I mean, they're reflecting on what I think was such a moment for the country yesterday. So, you know, obviously the Health Minister, Mkize, along with his panel of experts, really took the country into their confidence in an unprecedented way, I think. We were sort of taken along with the thinking, like this really complex, intricate, I think quite profound ways through which, you know, some of these experts are understanding the pandemic, but explained so beautifully, you know, and so simply for us to understand.
That's the other thing, that a lot of South Africans, I think in the beginning, the pandemic was just like, oh my gosh, what is this? And to have experts explain it to you and I, so that we can understand it, it will be simpler for us to adhere and to take care of ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. So obviously now the next step is to make sure that it's accessible to everyone, even those who aren't English first language speakers or people who are fluent in the language, because it's going to be crucial how we respond to the pandemic this week. You tracking the Star?
I am tracking the Star, Ayanda. Like I said, they're talking about the damaged schools, man. That's quite disheartening. That story, you know, we will feel the effect of when schools do reopen. But the other story on the Star is that political parties are now uniting against Liquor Forum's threat to fight the ban of liquor sales.
Yeah.
It seems that everyone in politics is feeling and understanding why we need to, you know, close liquor stores, and they are standing by government and all efforts. And a lot of them are explaining the why and the implications of having alcohol outlets open. So we'll see how that story pans out.
Yeah. Are we surprised? And, you know, I'm not asking this as a rhetorical question. I'm genuinely wondering, like, should we be surprised that an issue as divisive as this appears to be is not necessarily having that effect along the political spectrum? You know, I find it intriguing. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I don't know if you've ever been this united.
No.
Democratic South Africa, yeah.
This is the first time you've seen all the political parties across the board agreeing and standing by each other to enforce. You know, and so the other story that really caught my attention on the front page of the Star is a headline that says, "Fearful hospital workers demand clarity on virus." Now, from this article, the Mediclinic in Morningside is said to have 66 people, including staff and patients, that have tested positive for COVID-19. So, I mean, we were talking about KZN last week quite a bit, right? And now we understand that there could be cases here in Johannesburg, in Morningside, right? So, and workers are saying there's not much information coming from the hospital management. Sounds to say that there was a patient that was in the hospital who gave birth, and this patient and her baby tested positive, and then all the people they'd come into contact with in the hospital, including nursing staff and other staff of the hospital, have been tested. So what it seems like the people here are asking for is clarity from the hospital on how they're going to deal with this entire issue. So one of the stories that we're tracking off the diary is actually trying to get Mediclinic to explain to us, you know, what is this and how are they dealing with this? How is their staff affected? How are patients affected?
Absolutely.
What does this mean for them?
Absolutely. Because the immediate concern, of course, is that if they're continuing to operate as if nothing's happening, they're ticking time bomb and, you know, very quickly likely to be a source of a lot of distress for that community. All right, we'll leave things there, at least for now. Thank you very much for coming through once again to help us understand some of these big stories. It's certainly worth keeping your finger on the pulse as far as coronavirus is concerned. And today, Newzroom Afrika is doing exactly that, which is no different to how we do things, really. Mpho Raphata is the assignments editor here at Newzroom Afrika. Once again, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so in just a moment, we'll be getting you up to speed with details of how SASSA is planning to make sure that those who had qualified for grant beneficiaries but needed to reapply are able to do so even under lockdown. We'll bring you those details coming up in the show in just a moment. Do stay with us.